Stroev. Thank you for coming to my webinar. So we are waiting for more attendees to come, of course. And today the topic of a webinar is devoted to a new opening, to a new sharp opening, which is called Paulsen Sicilian. Some people call it Taimanov Sicilian, but they are talking about the same position. Let me demonstrate the position on the board. E4, C5, knight f3, e6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, and knight c6. In this position, of course, white has several plans, and you have to react properly. But what I like of this opening, that you get a really playable, complicated and sharp positions. And in every line you are able to get something that you can play for a win, or something that at least equalizes the position. Okay, so we are waiting for more attendees to come. Let's wait a bit. So I am going to stream this webinar on Twitch and YouTube. Also, I want you to let me know if the sound and video quality is good. Could you please tell me if the quality is good and you can hear me well without any noise? Okay, so perfect, the sound is good. Well, let's talk. Let's discuss. So what I'm going to do today, first of all, I'm going to demonstrate several lines that I learned myself, that I play in my games, and I also may offer you to learn. Well, yeah, so I'm thank you for your comments. I'm reading both Twitch and YouTube, but the thing is that on Twitch the streaming is slightly better and faster. So if there is no difference for you whether to watch on Twitch or on YouTube, you'd better choose Twitch. If YouTube, then if YouTube is better for you, then it's still fine, because I read the comments on YouTube as well. That's not a problem. But I just see a few attendees. Okay. Okay, let's start. So what we are waiting. So first of all, what moves white can play in this position? Before doing it, let me just explain the logic. So you know I'm also a fan of Kan Sicilian. I play e6 in this position. However, many of you may say that a6, well, yes, looks like a helpful move, but don't you think that we play too many times with the pawns? And here I would agree with you. Sometimes here black lags in development, but this is a more flexible move. For example, knight c3, queen c7, and if they continue with bishop e3, with queen d2, castle queenside, we can just play bishop b4 and stop this attack. No, you see queen d2, knight f6, the pawn is hanging, so they have to protect it. Then we play d5 with the intention of taking on d5 with the knight and pressuring the knight and the bishop on e3. And the best way is to take, of course, and then maybe play this move, leaving this bishop for black. So black can capture on a3 and get a bishop pair. You may also say, okay, but what about f3 in this position? Well, who can tell me what happens if f3 is played? Any suggestions? e5? Well, yes, black can play e5. Black can play e5, and after knight moves, just d4, and they have to sacrifice a minor piece for 2 pawns. This is a winning position for black, of course. Let's go back. So that was a6, a Kan Sicilian move. Well, in case of knight c6, which looks better and maybe more a helpful and development move, they may play knight c3. And if they play knight c3, you can continue with queen c7. And this is where they can castle queenside. So bishop e3, a6 to prevent knight b5. And for example, if in this position they continue with, let's say, queen d2, queen d2 is the most common move. You play this move. And if f4, you may play bishop b4. So you have to know this line. You avoid and then they castle queenside. Oh no, here they not. But for example, they can play f3 in this position. Oh, they can castle queenside first, and after bishop e7, they can play f3 and initiate a kingside attack. So this is what you have to learn how to play if you want to play Paulsen or Taimanov Sicilian. With Kan Sicilian, you avoid white's plan of castling queenside. However, it's fine actually. For me, especially when I play games, I really enjoy when players when I castle to the other side, to the opposite side than my opponent, because in this case I have a direct plan of what exactly to do. I can start with the queenside attack, and if I know what exactly to play, I play quite strong. So when you know that you shouldn't lose tempers, but immediately continue with b5 and move your pawns to attack the king, you are likely to succeed here. Okay, let's go back and let's start from the very beginning. So Knight c3 is the most common move, however I'm going to demonstrate some other lines for you as well. What if they choose Maroczy bind, c4, Knight f6, Knight c3, and bishop b4 in this position. There are three moves against Maroczy bind, three moves in this position white can play. f3 to support the pawn, which is now hanging, queen d3 to support everything, and knight c6. On this webinar we are going to cover only this one, knight takes c6, pawn takes c6, and well, one of the possible plans here is to play d5 and simplify, but you can also play a little bit more tricky. For example, bishop d3, which is a logical move, and with the intention to open up the bishop in case if you play d5. Then you can play e5. So e5 in Kan or even in Paulsen Sicilian is considered to be a mistake if we give up the control over the d5 square. But this time not. The pawn on c6 covers it. So bishop a3, d6. The only disadvantage you have is the backward pawn on d6. However, they also have some disadvantages, and I'm going to demonstrate why. So d6, and the idea of this move is not only to develop the bishop to control the center, but to play knight g4. For example, if they castle, you can immediately play knight g4, forcing the bishop to move away. Then bishop c5 with some pressure here. The position will be in your favor. Oh, queen h2, queen h4 is another idea. So here they have to play h3. Knight g4 is really dangerous. And then you take. You take on c3 to double the pawns. And start attacking these pawns. Well, what do you think is the most logical plan for white in this position? What they can do? c5. What else? No, I'm checking both platforms, Twitch and YouTube. Okay. No, not c5. I don't think c5 works. Well, c5, if c5 is played, you can just continue with d5 and get a strong pawn center, while these two pawns are weak. And you may say, well, but the c5 can be a passed pawn. Yes, it can be, but they can't support it from behind. So it's more a weakness than the passed pawn. Well, f4, yeah, with two bishops they should open up the position. f5 is quite dangerous because then they can continue a rapid attack on the king side, so we should take. And after bishop or rook takes on f4, relocate our pieces. So check, for example, king h1 and queen c5. Well, after queen c5, what do you think is our plan? How black takes the advantage of their position? Knight d7, and how to play then? So yes, we can play queen c5, then knight d7, knight e5, attacking here. So we even may sacrifice the pawn on d6, but take the one on e4 or c4. And this knight on e5 can successfully block the bishop. So actually d6 won't be a weakness. I would say that these three pawns are more weaknesses. The computer thinks the position is equal, however, because the bishop on d3 is really bad, I believe black has more chances to outplay white. Because these pawns are likely to die all three, while black may lose only the one on d6. Okay, so let's go back. That was one of the lines of Maroczy bind. Instead of c3, there is also knight b5 move. Knight b5 with the idea of knight d6. So you have to play d6, and after bishop f4, you have to play e5. Bishop e3. And in this case, you get a kind of a Sveshnikov variation of Sicilian defense, but with extra temper. For example, a6, knight goes here, knight f6, and if they continue with bishop g5, which is not the only move in this position, but the most popular move, with the intention to capture on f6 and then play knight d5, here you may realize that actually they spent two tempers on a bishop move. Well, actually three tempers. Bishop f4, bishop e3, and then bishop to g5, so three tempers. However, we played e7, e6, and e6, e5, so two tempers with the pawn. So white lost one temper. And this temper matters. Bishop e7, they take, for example, and if they want to capture the pawn on d6, we can just sacrifice this pawn. For example, knight d2, castle, knight c4, and just bishop e6. Who can tell me what happens in case if knight captures on d6? So your suggestions are queen b6 and knight e5. Well, you can just play queen e7, threatening with rook d8. And by sacrificing this pawn, you get a really strong initiative. For example, knight f5, bishop takes e5. Well, if they take, you can push the pawn to e4, threatening to capture and then play double attack to gain the material back and get a better pawn structure. If this move, it's still queen e5 and f5 will be hanging. Knight f6, queen f6. So it doesn't make sense to support because b2 at least is hanging. Well, nobody asks them to play knight f5, but on the next move we are likely to play rook d8 and trap this, pin the knight and gain it. So, but what if they go there, then rook f d8, queen has to move, well, bishop d3 maybe, but bishop d3 is a blunder, bishop d3, bishop c4 just. So, queen has to move, And in this position, it's up to you. You can maybe do this move, which is good. You can just play rook ac8 with the idea of playing a knight to b4 or knight to c4 or knight b4, knight d4, bishop g5, and of course bishop c4 to apply a double a discovered attack when you play the knight. For example, knight e3, bishop g5. Now, bishop e2, knight d4. You're threatening to take, and if the queen takes, you take there. So, let's say if they castle, then you win after rook takes c3 and knight e2. So, they are really under the pressure if they take with the knight. But I understand that almost nobody takes with the knight. Everybody takes with the queen to avoid problems with the pin. However, even in this case, you have enough compensation. Queen e8, vacating the square for the rook. What now? Well, the queen can be easily trapped, so they have to play properly. For example, let's say knight d5. Knight d5 is played, bishop d5. Oh, if pawn takes d5, it's just, well, knight d4 attacking here. So, let's say, no, bishop d3 is not an option because of e4. So, what, castle queenside? However, if this move is played, it's just queen a4, kind of a double attack. Oh, c2. c2 is actually a triple attack. If they play this move, then you have a deadly attack on c2. So knight d5, after bishop d5, they have to take with the queen, and rook d8, queen c5, bishop e7, and after the next move you can just play knight b4, threatening a fork on c2. This is where they are in trouble, and you have a full, more than a full compensation. Well, for example, if bishop d3 is played, how would you continue? Well, yes, if bishop d3 is played, you can simply capture on d3 with the rook. What happens then? C takes d3, right? You can take on d3 right away, or you should start with bishop c5. I think it's just a different move order. Queen b7, knight d3, and then, then you take on f2. For example, king d2, you take on f2 and continue your strong attack. Because if then you play knight c2 in this position instead of bishop c5, for example, you play knight c2, there is no advantage actually. You are down a pawn, the position is becomes more simple, and well, the fact that the king is weak cannot be exploited by black because of the pawn on d3. So no, bishop c5, and then knight d3, knight f2. That's the plan. Even without the exchange, while the king is exposed, there is a full compensation. Let's go back. So maybe instead of knight d5, let's try something else. So for example, what if the queen retreats back? Well, rook d8. With the idea of knight d4 is the next move. For example, knight d5 here, just knight d4. Now you're threatening to take and gain the material back. So I actually can't come up with a move. Maybe they have to do this, but this move bishop g5. Okay, let's say instead of this move, let's play knight cb6. Still bishop g5. With the idea to distract this time. So if they take, you take on c2, then on a1, and your knight stays alive. If not, if for example they continue with this, then because of a better development, you open up the position and punish your opponent for keeping the king in the center. Okay, let's go back. So here the main idea is to play rook d8 and take the initiative. So usually in Sveshnikov variation the d6 is a weak pawn, and black has to defend it, but not in this case. So in this line it's fine to sacrifice the pawn and take the advantage of a better development to be able to at least equalize, but maybe even to get a better or even a winning position. So knight b5, c4 is covered. Knight c6, the move that doesn't really deserve much attention, because I'm sure everyone wants to play this position with a strong pawn center. So knight c3, d5, bishop d3, and this is what black can only dream about. Here black has a strong pawn center, the open file to attack the potential weakness on b2. Sometimes I even saw that masters play a6 in this position and after knight c3 react with knight c6 because they wanna play this position but without a tempo. So this, in this exact case, a6 is a kind of a tempo loss. It's useless because we already have the pawn on c6 covering b5. And after bishop d3, d5, it's considered white is slightly better because of extra tempo, but the position is quite comfortable for black. Okay, let's go back to our original position, and now let's talk about knight c3 move. Well, there are several plans that white can apply, but we can divide them into two groups. The main line where white castles kingside, and the plan with castling queenside, so-called Bastrikov variations. So knight c3, queen c7. Oh, this time knight b5 is not a big problem. You can just escape to b8 and then play a6 b5 to chase the knight away. So even playing knight b5 is already a tempo loss. Well, let's talk about bishop e2 move, because as the main line, well, in such a case you continue with a6, castle, knight f6, and develop your pieces naturally. f4, fighting for e5, then you have to play d6. Here, one of the most common plans, no, a4 is possible to prevent b5, but the most common plan is queen e1, queen g3. Castle, queen g3, and what do you think? How black can continue their pieces development in this position? Maybe you analyze some classical games and you remember this position, but if not, try to guess. Okay. So knight d4, b5, bishop b7. Yes, this is actually the most competitive plan. What else? Well, there is also an old plan of bishop d7, knight takes d4, and bishop to c6. but the one with knight d4 and bishop d4 b5 looks better. Why not to continue with b5 right away? Who can answer this question? Okay, yeah, so if knight c6, queen c6, there are problems with this diagonal. For example, bishop f3 is not the most accurate move here, because black can react with d5 and close it. The best move is playing e5 first, because if knight moves away, it's e takes d6 and bishop f3. So for example, knight goes there. In this position you can also white can also play f5. For example, if e takes f5, it's bishop f3 and nobody supports the pawn on d5. And f5 threatens with f6. That's why it's dangerous. Even after knight takes e5, f6 is still possible. So e5, the knight has to go there, but after bishop d3 there is a strong pin that white takes the advantage of. That's why here, after before playing b5, you should capture on d4. Bishop d4 and then b5. a3, bishop b7, and after king h1 you should somehow play e5, but right now you don't have enough defenders and you can't move the knight. You blunder a checkmate on g7. So the plan for black is to play rook d8, rook e8, rook d7, get the bishop off the file and play e5 supported with this rook and this queen. Okay, so this is one of the main lines and the position is quite playable there. Let's go back and analyze several with where white castles queenside. So bishop a3, a6, and in this position they can play queen f3, they can play queen d2. Let's start with queen d2. Well, yeah, on this webinar we are going to cover only queen d2 line, because then I also wanted to demonstrate a game. So queen d2, knight f6. What happens then? Well, they can castle immediately or they can play f4. For example, if they play f4, it's bishop b4. e4 is hanging, and playing e5 is a blunder. You just play knight e4 and pressure here, or you can play knight d5 and take the bishop. So bishop d3 is supporting it. And what do you think? What's the next move black can play? Well, d5, no, d5 is not the most accurate one. If you play d5, it's e5, and after knight e4, they just take there. So it's still a playable position, but not as good as, for example, playing such move like knight to a5 here. If you play knight a5, you may get your knight to c4. For example, if your opponent just continues with castle kingside, knight c4, bishop c4, queen takes c4, and this pawn is still hanging, so they have to play e5 maybe, then knight d5, and they face with a problem. So you are going to capture here, or to have capture on c3 and gain the pawn for free. Even knight f5 doesn't work. The idea of this move is to fork on d6. You can just take there, and if queen c5, it's bishop c. If queen e3, it's bishop c5. Well, if queen e3 right away, it's e takes f6. E takes f5. I mean, e takes knight. So here they have to capture with the knight. Then you take or move the queen back, and this is a good position where you have to, where you play with two bishops. So, for example, you can retreat with your queen to c6 and then activate your bishops. Well, so knight c4 is quite annoying. That's why here, instead of castling, they should solve the problem immediately. And the best option is a3. But a3 provokes us to capture on c3 immediately. And they have to capture with the queen, because if not, if they capture with the pawn, then we can continue with b5 and knight to c4. Well, thank you for joining the webinar, especially I'm talking to newcomers. Well, on this channel we are analyzing chess. I explain how to improve different aspects of your chess games. Sometimes I give you tricks, and traps, but the main idea is to explain what you should do to think better in chess, what you should understand in chess. And on this webinar we are just studying how to play Paulsen Taimanov Sicilian. This is just one of the variation. So b5, then knight c4, bishop b7, and this is a very promising position because of these two double pawns that are located on a semi-open file and become the object of the attack. So taking with the pawn is too risky. Taken with the queen simplifies the position, which favors white. No, otherwise they are strategically in trouble. But, well, they have a bishop pair, however, both bishops are not so good. d5, and they have no defender, so they have either to push or to take. Well, if they take, it's fine. You capture with the e pawn, and now the pawn on d5 supports these two outposts. If they push, you can still play knight e4 and even let them take. Because then you get your knight to c4 and bishop to c6. So don't worry, e4 will be protected. You can even sacrifice this pawn because bishop c6 attacks the piece that captures on e4 and also the pawn on g2. But knight c4, bishop d7, bishop c6 should be enough to save the pawn on e4 and maybe to impose your playing style. Okay, let's go back. So if f4 is played, you have to play bishop b4 and knight a5, knight c4. Try to remember it if you're gonna play Paulsen Sicilian. Then? If they castle, now bishop b4 doesn't make much sense. There is no king, so the pin is not so strong. It makes sense to play, and actually they can play f3 here, and opening the position is now not in our favor because of the king being in the center. And you of course know that when the king is in the center and you lag in development, you shouldn't open up the position to avoid complications and to avoid the potential attack on your king. So bishop e7 instead, f3 and b5. b5 with the queenside attack. Today I'm going to demonstrate the game that was played by Giri with black pieces, and in that game Anish, instead of playing b5, played h5. However, then he combined two plans, h5 and b5. He didn't play the most accurate move order. Because I'll show you in the game. So here knight c6, d takes c6, and then you're gonna play e5. Because c6 is now covering d5, and it's okay to play e5 because you not only release the bishop but also restrict this bishop. For example, yeah, so for those who is looking for my YouTube channel, here it is. Okay, so for example, queen f2, e5. Well, queen f2 is played with the idea of bishop b6, but it's not a big problem. And if they play bishop c5 to try to weaken our position, just castle, and well, there is no advantage at all. You play bishop e6 and continue your queenside attack, and I believe in this position black will be faster. Moreover, the center is open, so that's why a direct kingside attack is unlikely to work. If something like g4 directly, still e5, h4, bishop e6, and now if g5 is played, you can either go to h5 and f4 or just to d7. For example, queen f2, castle, bishop h3, and this is where you can do two plans. You can play knight e8, knight d6, knight c4, attacking here and here, or just knight d7. However, if knight d7 is played, they can apply this simple tactical strike, which exchanges the bishop for a knight. Because if pawn takes, then the knight is trapped. Oh, when the pawn takes on d5, e-pawn takes on d5, and the bishop on e6 is trapped. So here you'd better take with the bishop, and then take the advantage of the rook being in the center and activate your pieces. So king b1, knight d5, knight f4. So you see there is no potential for a white's kingside attack because you are able to control everything and also to pressure on c2. Let's go back. So this is one of the lines, maybe the most popular one, where black feels comfortable and initiates a strong queenside attack. Okay. Okay, I think now we can start the game, and I will explain the difference with my move order. e4, c5, knight f3, e6. Oh, this is the game between Friza Nxd4 and Anish Giri. No, both are grandmasters, and Anish Giri was that time was an ordinary grandmaster. Nowadays he's one of the top grandmasters. So knight c6, d4 was played only now. C takes d4, knight takes d4, queen c7, bishop e3, a6, queen d2, knight f6, and after castle queenside it's bishop e7, f3, and h5. This is a kind of inaccuracy because in some of the positions, no, well, not a big inaccuracy actually, but in some positions g5 is weak because the pawn is already on h5, and sometimes it's also a tempo loss. For example, knight takes c6. What do you think, guys? Which piece to capture with? d takes c6 or what? Well, actually, all lines are playable. Well, queen c6 doesn't look good here. Queen c6, e5, and the knight is in trouble. It has to move to g8 or h7. No, queen c6 is a mistake, but b takes c6 and d takes c6 are all playable. Well, for example, b takes c6, bishop f4, so you have to play e5 if you don't want to move the queen one more time, and bishop g5 now. So they prevent us from playing d5, and we can't get rid of the bishop. Maybe a5, bishop c4, a4, a3, then queen b7 with some ideas of threatening there, but well, queen b7 is also played to support d5, but we still don't have enough supporters of the d5 square. So I think in this position, black lags in development. So taking with the b pawn doesn't look so good. What about the d pawn? Then queen f2, threatening to play bishop b6 because this move prevents our pawn, and also we have to play with the queen to a weird position like b8, for example. So that's why we have to spend the tempo on b5 right away, but bishop b6, queen goes there, bishop c5, and this time we are not castled, comparing to the line that I suggest in my variation that I just demonstrated previously. If here you take, then you can't castle, king side at least. No, yeah, you can't castle to both sides. If you don't take but castle immediately, then I think there is a problem after e5. What do you think? What white gonna do after knight d5? Exactly, knight e4, and well, there are some problems. This square is weakened. Some ideas of knight f6 sacrifice can be played. The bishop d3, g4 with a strong attack. So I think this is where white has advantage. Yeah, white has some serious advantage. So what am I saying? So knight c6 was the best option. And in such a case, I believe Giri wanted to capture with the b pawn and then play this line with queen b7. But, well, h5 looks weird in this case. h5, in my opinion, should be played later. But he was lucky because after queen f2 and d6, white spent the tempo on h3 and black instead played b5. So you see, black is about to capture on c6 with the queen, and they already control the e5 square with the d6 pawn. So that's fine. Knight c6, queen takes c6. This is what happened in the game. Bishop d3, and now a very important move that Giri played. All very important two moves. What do you think are these two moves? Okay, one of the suggestions is b4 and h4. Well, yes, and you have to combine these two moves. Giri did it in the wrong way. First he played h4, his opponent reacted with king b1 and then b4. But it was better to start with b4 first, knight goes there, then first prevent the knight activity with e5, and later, if they allow us, then to play h4. Well, if they play g4, for example, then instead of playing h4, which doesn't make much sense here, we'd better finish our piece's development. rook c8, no, threatening with, well, not threatening actually, but well, maybe this is a good plan. Then b3 to stop it. And what do you think? How black should play in this position? Yeah, b4 is a more forcing move, and white has to react in a certain way. e5, e4 looks good, but at the same time is too slow. You can play better in this position. Knight d7, but what for? Well, guys, here you can do something that affects both sides of the board. If you make a move that should affect both sides of the board, where this move should be played? It's the center, exactly. So d5 should be played. After that, your position is quite comfortable, so the knight comes to c3. And you also avoid the kingside attack by keeping the king in the center, while the rook can join the h file. I mean, they can join the game through the h file. Okay. So if we go back to what Anish Giri played, he played this, king went to b1, and then he continued with this move. I can say that playing knight h5 doesn't make much sense, because knight e2 is a part of their plan, and knight e2 is covering g3. So b4, knight e2, especially now knight h5 doesn't make any sense. And e5 to protect. So he did the similar thing, but he started with a different move. Bishop g5, not the best option, and actually kind of a blunder. What did they blunder with this move? Well, no, I'm mistaken. It's not a blunder. Sorry. I just underestimated white prospects after all the exchanges that I wanted to apply in this exact position. So d5 is the suggestion. What else? Well, knight g4. Yeah, I was talking about knight g4 move, but that move doesn't work here. If you calculate the line properly, knight g4, h takes g4, bishop takes g5, you can then realize that there is a pin on the h file, and they can just play g3 and gain the pawn on h4. Let me show you. Knight g4 is the typical idea that allows to exchange this knight for that bishop. So g3, and they are going to take, and if you push, they still take it. Not knight g4, but actually with this move they wanted to exchange and later occupy the c4 square with one of their pieces. But you see, e5 and b4 was played to dismiss the knight, and now knight can never Knight never occupies the d5 square. The only square from which it could jump to d5 is e3. But how to reach e3 in such a position? It's almost impossible. So these. 5 moves and the 6th one to jump to d5. After the 6th move, the position is going to change a lot. So, but actually black can save the knight on f6. They played knight d7. Here white thought that it's fine if the king goes to the center, but actually they underestimated that the king is pretty safe on e7. It's even better than on g8 for this exact position. Queen e3 was played, Queen c5 offering the exchange, because after the exchange the bishop on c8 is better than the one on d3, because the one on d3 is blocked with his own pawns. So they decided not to exchange and played this move. Oh, well, Queen g5 doesn't make much sense in this position, because of what? Well, not King f8, of course, it's a mate. Who can tell me what's wrong, what black can play in this position? Well, knight f6, and how to react to queen g7? But if you play rook h7, he just goes back. So here you can play with the bishop. Bishop e6, bishop h3, bishop b7. No, I would choose bishop e6 with the idea to trap. And if they try to escape, you can still chase them and then capture on g2, gaining the material back and activating your rooks. So queen g5 didn't make sense. Queen d2, knight comes back to f6. And this is where white played another mistake. So if you were white, how would you play here? Look at your pieces and try to find to improve any of them. Actually, the worst piece should be improved. What is the worst piece here for white? Knight c1, knight c1, knight b3 makes sense, of course. But the knight is not doing much on b3 and also becomes the object of the attack. The queen has only to retreat, so the knight is not the worst piece. The bishop is. Of course, because it's totally restricted. The only square it can move is c4. So the bishop can move to c4. And if you take, you get a checkmate. So you can't take. You should instead continue the attack. Like that. Then take maybe on e4 with knight e4, knight c3 ideas. But it may not happen. a4 or a4 b3, that's the main plan. However, after bishop b7, this bishop is already hanging, because if they play, let's say, something, you may take, and queen d6 is no longer a checkmate, because the rook is able to cover the d8 square. So here they have to decide what to play, and it's tough, because if they move the bishop here, you play a4 and trap it. If they move the queen to protect, you just use your other rook, and the bishop has to move anyway. Okay, let's go back. So bishop c4 should be played anyway. They played this move. I don't know what for. To play f4, to prevent the queen f2 move, or oh yeah, to play f4 of course. Bishop e6, f4 is played now, but a5, and this is not a big problem. Just bishop d7, the bishop relocates. This time bishop c4 doesn't work, because queen d6 doesn't lead to a checkmate. That's why instead of playing f5 and closing the position, they decided to open it and capture it on e5. D takes e5, queen g5 with some attack, and what do you think? Try to guess the next move that Anish Giri played. Rook h6, okay. What other suggestions are? Bishop a2? What's the idea of bishop a2? Bishop a2, then what? Okay, so no rook h6 is okay maybe, but instead of playing these moves, and of course not king f8 looks good as well, but rook h5 is better. For example, if now queen g7, then white loses the game. It's just knight e8. Well, the knight is hanging, so rook g8 doesn't work. But knight e8, and then the only square for the queen is g8, but after f5 the queen is trapped. It has no squares. The only square is g6, but then bishop f7, and now it's totally trapped. So taking after rook h5, taking on g7 was a blunder. This is what white noticed and decided to retreat. So this is a super move, rook h5. Rook d8 with knight e4 idea, that's why they played queen c1. And black continued their attack. a4, rook f3, rook d6 for now. Then rook e1, king f8 as a prophylaxis, and then instead of continuing the attack with b3, black decided to improve their position in general. No, well, they could allow themselves to do this to prepare for the endgame, because there is no clear plan for white. White pieces are stuck. So b3, knight d7, rook e f1 and f6. It's a strong pawn chain now. Queen e1, king f7. Now the rook can get to the 8th rank and then to c8 or a8. So rook g1 with the idea of trying to open up the position with g3 or g4, rook h8, g3 now, rook c8. So the threat is now to capture on d3. The best move is probably to get the queen back to support and to protect on c2, but even if this move is played, it's still a takes b3, c takes b3, and well, just move the queen away, queen c6, then knight c5, and pressure here and here. But white made a critical mistake. They played g takes h4, and after a takes b3, they realize that they can't capture on b3. So for example, a pawn takes, it's rook d3, queen c2, and rook a8 mate. If queen g3 in this position, it's still the same story. Rook d3 and queen g7 no longer works. After king e8, they stuck. Another check, but bishop f7. So, well, white resigned in this position after rook d3, but you see how black technically outplayed their opponent in this very nice opening. So let's go back and sum everything up. So here b4 h4, the plan was good, the move order wasn't the most accurate. e5, a very critical and important move, but this move can be played in case if they can't take the advantage of the weakness of d5. Here knight d7, another perfect move with the idea of locating the king in the center. And here rook h5. The queen has to retreat, and I believe this is where black already won the game, at least psychologically, because white was under the pressure. And then just improved the position and succeeded with the queenside attack. So that was the webinar about Paulsen or Taimanov Sicilian, and if you want to learn this line, you can enroll into my course. So for example, this is my course that I recently published, How to Defeat White with Paulsen Sicilian. It's about 12 hours course, which consists of 8 sections, and each section consists of a variation and 2 games, 2 game examples. Also there is a quiz, and well, it's a well-explained course. If you want to learn a new opening and you enjoy playing Sicilian, want to play something rare, then, well, this is a good choice for you, and this is where you can learn how to play it properly. So you see, even such strong players as Giri sometimes make inaccuracies, mistakes. So I analyze tons of games and cover it almost, I think, all inaccuracies and mistakes, so I improved even what Giri played. So until Monday you can get it with a 50% discount for $64 and $50. I'm going to share the link here. The coupon code is webinar 1 to 3. So if you are interested in it, you can also always message me at tricksofchess@gmail.com. I'm going to share my email as well. If you are looking for well, private classes, you can also email me. I also have 2 other news for you. My friend and I launched an online chess school. Let me share it. So this is a chess school that we started. I already announced it. So you can book a free class, for example, coaches. You can choose a coach, even a grandmaster, and book a test lesson. It's a 20 minutes lesson where a grandmaster analyzes your game and explains what you should do, how you should learn chess. Okay, guys, thank you for the webinar and hope to see you next Sunday. Good luck with your chess games. And if you like the webinars, please subscribe to my Twitch and YouTube channels.